having a church with a hierarchy that's able to make decisions or adjudicate or at least carry on and pass forth the truth that's been handed down, like that just makes so much more sense to me.
Hey everyone, welcome to Catholics in Ordinary Time. I'm Father Jack Benz, your host. This week, my guest is Cameron Edman. Cameron, very interesting person. He's a father and a husband of 7 children, even though it's kind of surprising given how young he is. And his conversion story, it really reflects who he is, and it's very blunt. He's a very blunt person by his own admission. And so it's a story of a blunt person looking for answers to his questions. And through the person of one priest that he encounters, he has these long conversations with this priest who's willing to hear him out, to answer his questions, to really be in a relationship with him over time so that Cameron can come to understand, oh, wait, this is something that would give me life. And indeed, his life so far in the Catholic faith has given him great meaning and great identity and a sense of purpose when times are good and when times are bad. I know that he's not the only one on this kind of journey, and I think you're going to enjoy this conversation with Cameron Edman. Super glad that you take the time. I know that you are busy, right? You work as a realtor, and you have how many children do you have?
I have 7 children, 1 in heaven and 6 with us here.
Oh gosh, yeah. So yeah, that's certainly, is that enough or is that just a good start?
Oh, depends on who you ask. How many kids are in families around you? I know families with 9 kids, and I have some with 2. So we're kind of right in the middle in the community I'm involved in here, at least.
Yeah. What are you thinking?
Well, I mean, we're trying to be open to what God has for us. We love kids. They are exhaustingly life-giving. Somehow they are both. And so we're, with all things considered, with my wife's health, due to some health concerns, we've had to have C-sections our last 4.
Oh, gosh.
And so, you can only have so many of those. And the recovery is harder every time. And, in our 30s now. So we'll see. I mean, we're trying to be open with the consideration of my wife's health. So we'll see how things play out.
Yeah, gosh. Yeah, that's impressive. That's impressive. Now, you live in Coeur d'Alene or you work in Coeur d'Alene or not?
Yeah, I'm in Post Falls. My wife was raised in Coeur d'Alene. And then we moved here in 2016. So we're on the right by Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls border. So we spend most of our time in Coeur d'Alene, especially at our parish there in St. Thomas, downtown Coeur d'Alene.
Okay. Yeah, that's where that is. Yeah. And you're originally from, I think, as I recall, Florence, Montana. Is that correct?
Yeah, Montana.
Yeah.
Well, originally from Los Angeles. My whole family's from Los Angeles. So I was born in California. And like I usually say, is almost everybody here has California roots in one form or another, unless they're a true local and they were born and raised here, which there are some of those too. But there's a lot of California roots, and I'm one of them.
Yeah.
But there have been different waves of people moving north to get out of California over the years, if we're being honest. And my family was part of the wave in like the mid '90s. Mm-hmm. So we moved up to Montana, 94. Interestingly, my wife was also born in Sacramento, and they also moved north in the mid '90s, but to Coeur d'Alene. And then our paths coincided later on. But I grew up, in Montana most of my life.
How old were you when you got to Montana?
6, I think, 6 or 7. I have small memories of California.
And where were you in California?
We were in Los Angeles, so like Torrance area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my whole family was born and raised there. And then at some point they just said, we've had enough. It's time to get out, time to stretch and get out of California. And they had some family follow them north as well. So that was a huge adventure for them with 3 kids in their 20s, no jobs, no house. And they just said, we're out. We got to do something different.
So they were leaving California rather than going to Montana.
Yeah, I was a little bit of both. There wasn't really much for them in Montana. There's like a long lost uncle they connected with, but it was really more of like they wanted a better lifestyle for the family, something more for raising the kids, and having lived the California lifestyle for all of their lives, they knew there was more that they wanted to pursue for the betterment of our family.
Yeah. And did that ultimately, has that worked out for your parents? Has that been a good thing?
Well, yeah, I think so. One of their big goals growing up, or when I was growing up, and they would actually openly say this, is that their goal was to change the trajectory of our family name, and so we, without throwing too much on our past generations, it's a very worldly life in a lot of ways. And my parents saw that, I think by the grace of God, because, nominally Protestant Christian at the time. But they knew that they needed to change. And so, they had the right nudge at the right time. And that was their goal all the way raising us, was to change the trajectory of our family. And I think they did, in a lot of ways. We can get into that more, but, it did cost them in a lot of ways, because their marriage suffered. And, this is actually a redemption story in and of itself, is that they divorced 7 years ago and then remarried 2 years ago.
Okay.
So that's a big story as well, but there's a lot there. But like it was just such a burden for them, kind of shouldering it alone of changing the family culture. And it really kind of did a number on their marriage. They didn't take care of quite as well as they should have. But yeah, it's been quite a journey for them. But essentially, it was a great one.
Yeah. And what was the faith practice that you grew up in?
Yeah. Well, my mom came from so Southern California was a hub for like Calvary Chapel.
Sure.
I don't remember the pastor who was down there, but she was right in the middle of that whole kind of revolution in the 80s, 70s and 80s. And so that made a huge impact on her. So we were raised in the 90s with a really strong, like evangelistic, kind of Baptist slant, Protestant upbringing, mostly led by my mom. My dad was, I think, supportive, but not necessarily on board with his heart. But like mentally and, socially, he knew those were the right things. Morally, he was on board. But my mom was the leader of the household as far as the faith was concerned. And she really poured herself out for us, myself, my older brother, and my younger sister. So we were raised very faithfully Protestant. We went to the church every Sunday.
What kind of church? Was it a non-denominational?
Yeah, it was like a non-denominational. I have a friend who says non-denominational churches are just Baptist churches with cooler websites.
That's good.
Baptist slants, but very non-denominational. And part of my journey actually started there. It all started there really because our pastor there, I love the man, and he's still a friend to our family to this day. But he is a fallen away Catholic. And so many of his sermons are kind of tainted with this hidden kind of subtle anti-Catholicism thrown in there that I never even realized growing up that was there. But it was just, that's all we knew was what he was preaching. And, it was great. And he ran a great church, and the youth group was strong. And we grew up with a really good youth group. That was the era of like the late 90s, early 2000s. The Protestant youth group was just huge at the time with the rock music and everything. And then the music is actually what kind of kept me connected to the faith too, because my brother and sister and I and our youth pastor formed a band, and we were playing worship music on Sundays. And so that was huge for me all through high school.
What were some of the big big banger songs at that time?
Yeah, well, it depends on what genre you're asking me about, because I was slipped into some more secular stuff off and on. Some of the Nickelback and the Stained, and some of that kind of the post grunge and the Linkin Park. But on the Christian side of things, like the big bands were like Pillar and Skillet and DC Talk and bands like that. And they would run these huge music festivals.
Yeah.
And so that was as it is now, really, music is a huge part of the Protestant culture, which is really cool. They do that in a great way in many ways. It's in their worship. It, lacks things obviously, but like it's a great way of how they attract and maintain people. Yeah.
And were you a singer or instrumentalist? Both? What'd you do?
Oh yeah. You don't want to hear me sing. I'm definitely not a singer. That's not my lane. No. I played guitar and drums and bass, kind of cycle through those three depending on who we were playing with. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So you were doing all that, and you were, I presume you were playing baseball.
I was, yeah.
You didn't just pick that up at college.
That's most of what I did. Let's just say that. Because that, as we were raised Protestant, and again, we were great upbringing, but alongside that, and probably more forefront than our faith, which, questionable at times, but the faith was right there. And so it was kind of alongside as a partner. But sports held a huge part of our lives, and mainly baseball. For some reason, we kind of slid into that direction. Myself, my brother were all tall, so we could have played basketball. We played a little bit of hockey, soccer. We didn't play football. I feel like I would have got broken. I was a little lanky at the time, but for some reason, my brother and I really pivoted towards baseball in high school specifically. And we were always kind of some of the better players on our team. And so very competitive. My dad was our coach, and then we got into high school and we won a couple state championships. And so that was really kind of propelling me forward. That was my drive, was sports really in high school, along with, the faith and the community that we had built at our church. But that was, like I said, more along for the ride with sports at the time.
Yeah. You were raised in a Christian family, and your mother's carrying a lot of that burden. But you also were having your own, it was important to you as well.
It was, yeah. I mean, I think, I've said this to her multiple times, actually. There's something that was implanted in my heart from her, from the Holy Spirit, that, my conscience was formed, my heart was formed. Like, I knew deep down what I wanted. Like, I wanted a relationship with Christ. I wanted to live the faith. I knew what was right and wrong. Occasionally I did some stupid 16, 17-year-old stuff, and I didn't follow that as well as I should have. And that continues today, obviously in different forms, but like, that was planted. And so I knew I wanted that. And all through college, I actually went to church on my own on Sundays by myself with no teammates, nobody. And I just found a local church wherever I was, at whatever college I was. I went to a junior college and then Gonzaga University. I just went by myself. And to this day, I'm actually kind of shocked by that, honestly, because of the many other things that someone could do on a Sunday morning. I chose to go to church. And so it was just kind of almost a habit and like a lifestyle and a culture that was just ingrained in my heart, which I'm deeply grateful for.
Are you lucky to be kind of a person that likes routine? That,
Yeah.
So that helps, right? Yeah.
I think that's part, and that was maybe like a connection to home, or like a steadiness in the craziness of college athletics, whatever it may be, that gave me some peace for sure. Yeah.
So you went to a junior college, and then I presume you finished up 2 years at Gonzaga?
Yeah, that's right. So I wasn't actually really recruited much out of high school when we were talking baseball. I really knew I wanted to play, but I jumped onto a travel team, and one junior college saw me and offered me a small scholarship in Oregon. And I said, yeah, I'll go play baseball for some random junior college I've never heard of.
What was it? Which one was it?
Treasure Valley Community College. It's just on the Oregon side of the border from.
You don't have to tell me.
Yeah, Oregon. You're familiar.
I grew up outside of Burns.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
With family that went to TVCC, Chuckers.
Yeah.
Yep, the whole thing. Yep.
The Chuckers, yeah, go Chucks.
Go Chucks.
I spent 2 years there with Coach Bauman, and it was actually an incredible experience because I realized how raw I was as a player and as a person, honestly. Lacking maybe some discipline and, some gumption, some things that I didn't quite grow in my small town high school experience. And so he really put us through the ringer. He had this really robust conditioning program and practice program. And, he would bring in 60 guys in the fall. And then a month later, they had self-whittled themselves down to a 25-man team because the program was so difficult. And so he really helped me grow up as a man. And as a player. And so my freshman year, I just did okay, but I really worked hard that second year in the off season and devoted myself to it. And thankfully I was making good choices. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't doing anything that would really endanger my passion at the time. And so I really had a really good season my second year there at Treasure Valley, and was able to catch the eye of the Gonzaga University coaches.
Yeah. How was your experience going? You come in as a Christian. How was it coming into a Catholic setting? Yeah,
well, I didn't really pay much attention to it, to be honest with you. It's so the journey to Gonzaga. So I enrolled there in the fall of 2008, and that had been my goal, was actually to get to Gonzaga University ever since I was probably 11 years old, which is another interesting piece because when they made that first Elite Eight run in the NCAA basketball tournament in 1999, I was 11 or 12. And I remember having like 102-degree fever. I'm sick as a dog, but I'm watching them. And we're using one of these old TVs with the antennas they have to adjust. And I said, this isn't working. I went outside. There's 3 feet of snow on our roof. I climbed up on our roof, adjusted our antenna. I came back in and I said, I got to watch these guys. I don't know what it is about these guys. I love this team. And so honestly, from then I was hooked. I was a Zag for life at that point. My whole career, everything was pointed towards getting to Gonzaga University, based on that. And so Yeah. And so that was really what drove me there. And then, but again, what's so funny is that I didn't even really realize it was a Catholic school. I mean, what's Gonzaga? It's a cool name with a Z in it. I don't know. The Zag sounds great. Sign me up. Because I never knew Catholics growing up. Wasn't a part of my life. Wasn't familiar with any. I never spoken to a Catholic, and not even through junior college. I just wasn't even familiar with that entire world. I just knew that I loved the school and I wanted to be there. My brother went there, and I'm like, not embedded it further. I said, yeah, that's where I'm going. So thankfully, they gave me a recruited walk-on position on the team, not even a scholarship. They said, we'll give you a spot. You got to earn your time. And I said, let's go. So that's when I came. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it good 2 years?
Yeah, it was actually 3+ years. In the sense that first year I redshirted. The team was really good and I was out of my league. And so I was not in a position to start. So I redshirted that first year. I didn't play, and they won the conference. And, but I love the school. Absolutely love the school. It's one of my favorite places. And then, I went back for my senior year, and I did end up starting, and I played well-ish. But at that point, I had just turned 21, and, it had been a grind of a college, and I let loose a little bit, unfortunately. So that really affected kind of my psyche and my ability. And honestly, I think about my soul and my conscience, because it really hit me of the decisions I was making. I knew we were wrong. I'm out drinking and partying and things like this. And it just was not great, right, for any aspect of the human. So that affected me pretty deeply. And so I really focused on cleaning myself up that summer a little bit and getting back on track. And I went back for my redshirt senior year, but I'd already graduated. And so I started working on my master's degree in organizational leadership at Gonzaga, which is a great program. And then, so that's when I really kind of started hitting it hard, and I switched positions. I became a catcher. So I'm involved in the game way more, and I'm looking at pitches. I'm thinking about the game, and I'm actually playing the game rather than running around out there. And so all these things kind of happened. The other big thing that happened is, and here's where things really kind of kick into gear as far as the conversion is concerned, is I met this really sweet girl in FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. So I was actually leader of that at the time, and we would just meet with some other athletes. We go over a Bible verse or a chapter and kind of talk about it, and then hang out and have snacks and whatever have you. And this cute little Catholic girl who's on the golf team came, and initially there wasn't really a spark, because honestly, I was trying to just kind of lead the group and trying to take. I was 22 at the time, and everyone's pretty young, so I'm trying to keep things rolling and all this. But anyway, that relationship developed, and she was the first Catholic really in my life, and that's kind of where things really started to roll as far as that's concerned.
And you still know this person?
Yeah, she's my wife.
Oh, okay.
So I know her pretty well.
Just kind of connecting that. Yeah. I was assuming.
Just connecting that.
But yeah, it would be kind of awkward, and you're like, yeah. Well,
yeah. That was the end of that. Yeah. I needed a pause for a coffee. That's why I took a break. Right, there you go.
The dramatic pause.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because we started dating, and again, I'm really trying to live the pretty faithful Protestant life, and she's a cradle Catholic. Grew up going to a traditional Latin mass, and her family was kind of coming back to some of the Novus Ordo parishes here in Coeur d'Alene, like St. Thomas, and so she was really involved and really actively learning her faith for herself at the time too, because that was her transition as well. And so what we did is we got some of the basics out of the way. We said, I actually sat her down, and she to this day laughs at me for this, because I sat her down and she said, the audacity for you to ask me these questions. I said, okay, so no sex before marriage, right? You believe in the Trinity, right? I don't know what Catholics believe. You believe Jesus is God, right? I didn't even know that stuff about Catholics, So got the basics out of the way and said, all right, I think we're close enough. We can start dating, and then we'll kind of go from there, You
sound like no fun at all, actually.
Yeah, I know, right? How romantic is that?
Not at all. So she has a pretty high tolerance for non-romance. Yeah.
And that, technically too, she does say that's one thing she likes about me is my bluntness. I'll just come in and say it, so hopefully that was a good thing. But through that spring season in 2011, I played really well and had a really great season at GU, started every game. I ended up getting drafted by the Baltimore Orioles. which was another dream come true.
Yeah.
So a lot of great things happening. And then they shipped me off to Florida that summer to go play minor league baseball. And so now we're doing the long distance relationship. And this is where things start to strain a little bit and where I'm really starting to dig into what this faith actually is. So we're, having discussions and disputes over religion over the phone. And I'm researching, I'm reading, we're trying to figure out, because I was getting serious. So we say there's definitely some differences here. So we got to work through this if this is something that's going to last, And so when I got back from the summer and the off season, we actually ended up breaking up because we realized we're not on the same page here. There's just a stopping point. And so, honestly though, at that point I had heard enough to be curious, and I knew this girl well enough to be like, she's not crazy. Things she's saying might sound crazy to me, but she's not crazy, And so it encouraged me to dig further. And so what I did is, there's actually a priest in Spokane, Father Vivek, who's still there at Mary Queen Parish. And I took a binder of questions this thick of all the things that the misconceptions I had, the questions I had about the church. And I sat down with him and I said, okay, don't try to convert me. Again, there's bluntness coming out, apparently. Shame on me. Don't try to convert me. Just shoot me straight, answer my questions, tell me like it is that I'm at a crisis here. I need to know what it is that Catholics believe from the horse's mouth, And then, he sat down with me probably 3-4 hours a week for a couple months. And knowing now the time commitments of priests, I couldn't believe he was able to do that for me. So I'm eternally grateful for him. And so I would fire questions at him and he would just answer. I mean, and if anyone knows Father Vivek, who's watching this or listening to this, I didn't need to give him that excuse to just be blunt, because that's just what he does anyway. So we were a pretty good match. So he, I would ask him all the questions like, why do you worship Mary? Right? All these silly Protestant questions like, so you think you can, like, your works get you to heaven, or what is this word purgatory? I've never heard this word in my life. Tell me what this is, And so there is some innocent questions mixed in with like kind of some accusatory questions of just kind of like the subtleties that have been pushed into my brain all throughout my faith life. And so, through that winter, we're talking, I'm reading, I've got stacks of books, because essentially in the back of my mind, I still know that there's this girl out there who is a catch. And I'm like, I'm not doing this for her. I'm very clear. That was even in my brain. I'm like, I'm not doing this for her. I'm doing this for me, with the understanding that maybe that's a possibility. I don't know. So through this time, as I'm reading and researching, and like, it's becoming clear to me. And at one point I just said, unfortunately, I don't think I have a choice anymore, unfortunately, because, things change when you make these decisions, right? Like it's not easy. And there was one point where it became pretty clear, where I was reading like this little tract. I don't know what it was, like a Protestant little pamphlet. It was talking about transubstantiation, right? And it was claiming that this was an idea or a notion that came out of the church in the Middle Ages, 1500s, 1600s, whatever it was. I think it was like a council during that time. And I read that, looked at it, I said, no, that's not right. Shoot. Now you're wrong. That's wrong. And I said, oh, shoot, now I'm in trouble. I'm defending the church. Now now I really have to join. This isn't good, And so, because I'm like, no, that's not what they believe. Even if I don't believe it, that's not what they believe. You're misrepresenting,
Yeah.
So like, at least I knew that much. And then I made it. I finally went to Father Vivek and I said, okay, I've heard enough. Let's do this. What do I need to do? So he, in a true Father Vivek style, he said, okay, well, we'll get you a sponsor and we'll get you baptized. I said, oh, so no like celebration. You're not going to say good for you or happy. He's like, no, he doesn't need to wear it. No, that's not how it goes. That's how Father Vivek works. He's amazing though. So, that was the spring of 2012. 2012 ended up being a really incredible year because I converted to the faith that February of 2012. To little fanfare, like it wasn't, you hear these people. I even talked to one this morning, a gentleman I met with for coffee, and he said he's experiencing a reversion and he's had this incredible like spiritual experience in a dream or in a vision, and it just like snapped him out of it. And it's like he's awake, the light is there, and all of a sudden like everything, but like No, mine wasn't like that. And
Mhm.
I occasionally I found myself like bemoaning it, like, oh, my conversion was lame, like I just kind of walked in and I did confessions, Father Vivek, and then I had actually a priest in the Diocese of Seattle, Father Justin Ryan was my sponsor. I was rebaptized. We have records of my first baptism, and then I did confessions, Father Vivek, and then when I went to receive First Communion, it was like, I'm ready for this like evangelic experience, this angelic experience, like beatific vision. It's like receive. I go back. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's it. Cool, awesome. Let's go. My Catholic life. But like it was kind of good in a way because it's like this is a journey. Like it almost was signifying to me, like you're not here just for the experience. You're not here for
Mhm.
the high. You're not here for that. You're here for like because it's true. You believe it in your heart. You long for this relationship with Christ in the Eucharist, and this is your life journey. And so let's just
Mhm.
step one. Let's go. And that kind of is indicative a little bit of like my sports experience too, because like I was never a star. I never had these highs. I never like I was out there just like garnering all this attention. It was like, no, I put in the work day to day. I worked really hard. I earned my position. Didn't do anything spectacular, but it was like this journey that I was constantly on. And so I kind of relate that to my conversion of like, there's nothing spectacular about it, but it was just the step in the journey, like the little work that gets done behind the scenes. And so
Mhm.
I've learned to appreciate that over time, in a lot of ways. So yeah, February of 2012 is when I officially came in the church, and then I reconnected with my girlfriend at the time. Her name's Genevieve, and we reconnected and started dating again. Thanks be to God. Right before I left for spring training, and
Mm.
so I like to think all of 2012 was my conversion because I left for spring training like a week after I converted and got back together with my girlfriend at the time, and I said, "Okay, time to live my faith on my own and figure out how to do this." And so it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I know I have to go to mass on Sundays. I'll find a parish. How do I do that? I'm getting paid $1,000 a month to play minor leagues. How much does the taxi cost? I don't know. So all these things, but like, it was such a glorious time in my opinion of like, just like owning this, it was almost better than if I was with my girlfriend. And that sounds terrible, but like, I got to just go out there and own it. Like I spent $20 every week on a taxi. And then there was a time I bought a rack of beer for a buddy who had a car so I could borrow his car to go to mass. And I convinced 5 teammates to go to Tridium Mass that Easter, right? We went to Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Or like I negotiated, said, hey, listen, you take me Thursday, Saturday, I'll do something for you on Friday. I'll drive you somewhere. I'll be your DD, whatever. So I'm making all these like backdoor deals to help people drive me to mass. I discovered like the Magnificat, and I had that in my locker room, and I'm reading that before games. And then I used to listen to a lot of hard rock, which I do occasionally when I work out, but I shifted. I got turned on a Gregorian chant. So I had that going on my headphones before games to kind of get me in a better zone. So like all these things were just such an incredible, like new, fresh, like deep experience for me as I converted. I have memories of like being on the road and it's a Friday night. We just finished a game. It's 10 p.m. and we're in the middle of nowhere on the East Coast somewhere. I'm exhausted. It's been if you've ever been on the East Coast in the summer, it just completely zaps you. I'm
Yeah.
done. Like, I need some food. There's nowhere there I'm like, it's Friday. It's regular time. I said, I'm a new Catholic. I'm doing this. I'm doing the whole thing. I can't eat meat here. So I ended up buying this huge Chinese chicken bowl thing. And from 10:30 to midnight, I sat there in my hotel room staring at it. The clock hit midnight, and then I dug in. I'm like, it's Friday. I can't do this. This is what I am now. And then we're in Brooklyn where they do the hot dog eating contest. We're playing in that stadium right there, which was an incredible experience. It was
Yeah.
super. But again, that's another Friday, and I couldn't get a hot dog. I couldn't get this. I'm like, what am I going to eat for lunch before the game? There's a Subway down the road. I get a tuna sandwich. I come back, and it's just like this sloppy mess from the Brooklyn humidity. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not eating today. Don't eat on Fridays. I guess that's just my thing now. It doesn't matter how bad I play. But, and, I, at one point, let's see, was in Pennsylvania. I walked, I think, 5 miles to mass before the game. Got there, walked back, barely got the bus to the game. And so like, I don't know, it was just this incredible, my heart was just being converted. And like, I'm just it allowed me to kind of like own it for myself and to be like, doesn't matter what obstacles are in your way. Like, this is your life. And it's like the depth and the joy and the peace that it created, even when I played terribly all summer, it was just incredible. And so like, I really cherished that summer of 2012 where I was able to just kind of enter in and live out this faith on my own. It was really incredible.
And the obstacles, or you've described some of the physical ones, which are considerable, but were there obstacles as far as you showing up to Mass and saying, this is not any fun, or you were at parishes where there was, the preaching or the presiding or the music or whatever? How did you navigate that part of the experience?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about that before, but now let me think. It was also new to me that I didn't really know how to decipher
Mm-hmm.
one from another,
Yeah.
is maybe how I would describe it. Like this parish I went to in Sarasota, Florida, was like this open air, massive stadium seating, but like still gorgeous, not like a modern monstrosity, but like still like very gorgeous and aesthetically beautiful. And they had like this incredible choir. And, I'm just like, musically, I knew that was really good.
Mm-hmm.
But then people, I did see people like occasionally do strange things. Like they would take the Eucharist and like rub it on their bodies and things. And like thinking back, I'm like, ooh, that probably wasn't so great. I'm just taking this all in. I'm just like, oh, they're doing that. Okay, that's a thing. I see that, But then I go to another parish, and where was this? This might have been in Vermont. We travel all the way up to Vermont. And, it's just like dead quiet. There's no kids. There's just a bunch of people over 70 years old, which God bless them. They're holding the church together in a lot of ways. And it's just like, this is interesting too. Like, I feel like I'm totally standing out. This is weird. I'm wearing shorts and t-shirt, whatever I'm able to find at the time. And so like, I'm just taking this all in. Like, I didn't even have any level of discernment of like what I like, good and bad. It was all part of like the just dump in, give me everything I can, and let me just kind of own this thing,
And you come back, and do you stop playing ball?
Yeah, so that season was a tough one in many ways. Like I played well, but there's a lot of politics in the minor leagues, kind of rightfully so. They play the players they have money invested in, right? And I signed $1,000. I was a low round draft pick, again, I had to scrap for it. And so they didn't have a lot of invest in me. And so I started playing well. I started hitting home runs. I was batting cleanup, and like, hey, this is going okay. I'm starting to kind of lead the team a little bit. And then we signed a new kid who just won a national championship out of the University of South Carolina. And they moved me to first base at the time. And he's the first baseman, so I'm back on the bench. It's like, I get it. Mm-hmm. It stinks, but I get it, and they signed him for a bunch of money. And it's like, and then he got hurt and I got back in there. And at that point, I was just like, man, I'm 23. I'm in single A. I was kind of battling an arm injury. I wasn't playing well. At that point, I'm engaged. So there's another piece of it. My wife had come out to Florida. I asked her to marry me on the beach. So we're engaged at that point. And I'm traveling in the far reaches of the northeastern seaboard and making $1,000 a month. I'm like, I think this is it. This is just not it. Like I gave it a shot, but it was time. Everybody calls it at some point, whether someone else does it for you or you call it. It's like, I think I'm making that decision. And I hadn't even in my heart, I think I had in my mind, I'm like, I still want to play, And so like my last at bat, I remember it pretty distinctly. It was in Vermont. So our last road trip was the farthest one away from our hometown near Baltimore. And I walked. I'm like, I am not going to strike on my last at bat in case this is my last one in my career. I remember telling myself that before I went to bat. And I was like, that's probably not a great thought before you go to hit, but whatever. So I walked my last at bat, and I remember like, we're drinking a few beers on the bus on the way back, and I'm just kind of reminiscing. It's like, I don't know if I can do this again. This is brutal. This is a tough life, And then sure enough, spring training rolled around that next spring, and I actually hadn't given my retirement notice yet, but it became, usually you start training like in January to get ready, and even sooner generally, but it's like February and I'm kind of sitting around like, yeah, now I'm just not feeling it, So I put in my notice at that point, but yeah, so it was, thankfully I was able to retire on kind of my own accord a little bit. And I don't have bitterness about the game. Some guys are like, they chase the minors for 7-8 years and then they get cut, and there's like 30 years old and directionless and don't have any kind of regard for the game or the world or what's happening or skill. So anyway, thankfully I exited kind of in a decent position with the ability still to kind of pursue my dream for a couple of years.
Yeah, and luckily, at $1,000 a month, you'd put a lot of money in the bank. So
That's right.
that
I
was
very, very well invested,
it
all
was
kinds of
a
portfolio.
no,
Yeah,
that's a
for sure.
whole complicated thing. So you're dirt broke, you're engaged, and then what?
Yeah, so 2012 was a great year. So that's when I came into the faith. I had that my big minor league season where I traveled all across the Eastern Seaboard. I got engaged that summer on the beach in Sarasota with my teammates all there cheering. It was pretty incredible. And then training somewhat that off season, I got a job. I'm doing like hitting instruction. I'm doing clinics and lessons. And then my wife and I got married that winter of 2012. So
Mm-hmm.
2012 was a pretty special year. We got
Yeah.
married December 29th of 2012. So yeah, that's a pretty memorable year for sure.
Yeah. And what was your Catholic practice in that next phase?
Yeah.
You moved back to the Coeur d'Alene area?
Yeah. So yeah, let me think. So actually Father Vivek married us as well, and he's been in our life ever since. And so I huge props to Father Vivek for sure. He did our marriage prep and everything. And then so at that point, I'm like, well, I quit baseball, so I need to find a real job. What do I do? Well, my degree was in communication and organizational leadership with an emphasis on servant leadership.
Mm.
So really what that kind of pushes you in is like management, team leading, and that kind of thing. And so I had a friend, an old teammate who worked at a manufacturing company in central Washington near Moses Lake, Wenatchee, Ephrata area. So I interviewed there and got a job as like a team leader in a food manufacturing company. And we moved to the middle of Washington to start our life together right after we got married. And so, actually my wife was still in college. She finished her senior season that year. And then we moved the spring, early summer of 2013. So
To
anyway,
Afraid of Soap Lake?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice. Oh.
So not my favorite place. There's some good people there, but I sure
Sure.
didn't like living there. I will say that. Wenatchee's nice, but Ephrata, Quincy was tough. It was tough because we were away kind of for the first time. It was great because again, like we're in the desert, like we're living our life. It's almost like the journey of working hard in practice and putting in the extra effort. And then that summer where it's like you just got to do it. You got to own it. You're off on your own. We were off on our own together. We did find this parish that was a really kind of vibrant little oasis in the desert, actually. St. Rose of Lima Parish in Ephrata. And there were some great people there that we connected with, and they really took us in. We were one of the only younger families. There were like some middle-aged families there with older kids, but we were obviously younger. And so it was, yeah, man, it's tough actually to talk about that because there are several things that happened there that really kind of affected us dramatically going forward. So we had our first child. I'm going to fast forward a little bit because I think this is really important.
Yeah, please.
We had our first child, our son, Gabe, almost exactly a year after we got married. So December of 2013. So things are great. We're cruising along. We love having our little boy. We bought our first house in Ephrata right down from the church, and we're kind of planted. We've got some friends down the road that I play rock music with a couple days a month and in this garage. And like, this is great. We're living our little kind of small town life. And then we get pregnant with our second boy in 2015. And then life kind of pivots a little bit where we found out he had a condition called acrania where in the womb, his skull doesn't grow all the way over his brain. And so it's exposed. And there's not really a cure for it because many reasons, one of them being because most times when babies are found that way, they're aborted. And so, we were pushed that direction and they said, he's not going to survive more than a couple minutes out the womb. It's fatal. And so it was never a decision really for us. The decision was always carry him to term and love him as best we can. And then trust God with the rest. And so again, in the desert, we're putting in the work. And I remember that summer and fall being, as things are really hard in your life, like, and all throughout church history, the church fathers and saints all say this, like the more suffering you have, the closer you are to the heart of Christ. And like that rang true because knowing that our child was going to die, who was growing in my wife's womb, like that is something I wouldn't wish my worst enemy.
Yeah.
So he was born September 15th, 2015, stillborn. He died actually a few seconds before he emerged from the birth canal. So we didn't get to meet him. And so many questions about that, but like what a journey to be able to trust God with that whole story and with that specific scenario. Like we couldn't even look him in the eyes just 1 second, like initially that was so hard, but like so many things, I can many direction of this, but so many things happened that like revealed God's love and guidance and hand in our life after that point, that like further embedded our trust in our faith in his goodness and in the church specifically. And so, but like something like that, you can't help but allow it to like completely alter your life for better or worse. One of the, and the stat actually goes when families lose a child, there's a pretty high separation and divorce rate.
Sure.
It's really sad. It's because either basically you go one direction, this vastly improves your life and it makes you better and grittier and more determined and more faithful and more trusting, or you get bitter, you get pessimistic, you get sad, you leave your friends and you leave your faith. You can't go the same way. It's kind of like when the disciples met Jesus on the way. It's like when he revealed himself, you don't go the same way anymore. You're going back or you're going somewhere, but you're not going the same way. And so that was true for us. And so light bulb moment, we said, we're not living here anymore. We got to get close to family. We got to get close to our community. So every effort was made and we moved back to the Coeur d'Alene area. She's from here. We went to school at Spokane, obviously. So we're from this area. We know a lot of people here. 2016. So less than a year later, about a year later, we moved back to Spokane, Coeur d'Alene area, to just like be close to family. And at the time, our priest, who is here now at St. Thomas, Father Mariusz Majewski, he was at St. Thomas then. He was gone for a while. Now he's back. But he was the one who actually buried our child in Coeur d'Alene because we knew we were going to move here. And he was just such a gracious priest. And again, an embedding of like the church cares, the church loves, the church wants us to be close to the heart of Jesus. And so that was an incredible experience with Father Mariusz. So we moved back to Spokane, Coeur d'Alene area. And, I don't want to say pick up the pieces, but it's like, okay, what do we do now? We have a child, we lost a child, and here we are. And so anyway, a lot of us ain't go with that, but what a humbling and like spiritually enriching experience, while also like the most torturous thing I've ever experienced, I would say.
Yeah. I was curious about how that all came apart, because I had known that y'all had lost a child, and I wasn't sure how what the conditions were. And I'm really interested to hear from you that it drew you closer to each other and to your faith, and then to your community, to your family, all that grace. That seems like a lot of grace in coming out of a really difficult situation.
Yeah.
And what's your current experience of the church? Like you're a grand old father. You have all these kids. You're a pillar of the community. How's all that going?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know about that. Let's see. Well, a lot of things have taken place. So we had another son in 2017, another son in 2018, and I'm working at like a local manufacturing company at the time. And then we had another son in 2020, right in the midst of COVID. Now we have 4 sons.
People have daughters. You know that?
They do. And I didn't pick up on that till this year.
Okay.
We had a daughter. I didn't realize that. I'm like, interesting.
Right, sure.
Yeah. So technically that's, 5 sons so far, with the one that we lost. And then now we have the 4 with us. And then my wife and I started a little homeschool co-op here out of our parish at St. Thomas, as we're living the Catholic life during COVID. And it's like, we need a place to gather in the fall. It's like, what do we do? Everyone needs community. Homeschool family. So we started a little homeschool co-op called Cabrini Co-op. And we run that to this day. And we're now up to 100 students and 40 families, and 2.5-day little hybrid co-op homeschool community, which is really neat. Just a bunch of families trying to live the faith together and uplift our kids in the faith. And I see every one of these kids and families at Mass at St. Thomas or St. Joan of Arc or St. Pius in Coeur d'Alene, and just trying to do the things of all the craziness in the last 5 years and all these things. We're like, we are going to make a little insulated environment for our kids to where they grow up in a Catholic environment that we can be proud of.
Yeah.
And then 3 years ago, my wife, in the midst of all that in 2022, my wife played a big part in founding a classical high school here in Coeur d'Alene in the Catholic tradition called Coeur de Christ Academy. And so we're very involved in that high school as well. So, and then I was on the parish council at St. Thomas. I helped lead a praise and worship night for a little while. I did like a Catholic sports camp in the summers. I did like a Catholic service network. And so, we have issues. We have problems with not sitting still, apparently. We're always out there. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with us. We'll occasionally look at ourselves at night with 6 kids and 4 organizations we're running, plus full-time jobs. You're like, I'm so sorry for this. I don't know how we got here, but this is where we are, but we love it.
That sounds spectacular. It really does. That's great.
Yeah.
That's good. So here you're a member of the church, member of the Catholic Church in a specific spot. How do you think the church is going when you think about your kids being involved in it? And you hopeful? Or how are you?
Yeah, that's a big question. I am quite hopeful, actually. I'm very optimistic. There's a lot of things that have factored into it, but I think there's like a cultural wave that's kind of shifting, it feels like to me, and there's a lot of factors, like I said, but I think there's the eyes are being opened, scales are falling from eyes. I mean, I've talked to and heard from multiple people who are like having these experiences, like I mentioned earlier, of this gentleman I spoke with. They're like, these millennials in my generation who've left the faith for 20 years are saying, oh, wait, whoa, I need to get back. And so we're seeing like this resurgence and interest in the faith, just wanting to be close to Christ and understand what it means to be a Christian. I can't speak necessarily for like the Protestant world, but the Catholic world specifically, even the data is showing that so year over year, 2024 or 2023 was the first year in 30 years that we had not seen a decrease in people saying they were Catholic. First year that it flatlined. And then 2024, it actually ticked up. So the data actually supports it. And I think the culture is supporting it, especially where we live in Coeur d'Alene. It's a very family-friendly, conservative Christian culture. And then we have some great friends. And so, yeah, I'm optimistic, and I am, I'm all in. My wife is all in, and our friends are all in. And it's like, whatever it takes, I feel like, whether you have to die for it if we don't sleep, like, we're going to try to carry the flag to the next generation, to use the words of a good priest friend of ours. We're going to try to carry that flag, give it to the next person who's going to give it to the next person. And I think, there's great opportunity for that here.
Yeah.
In the Catholic Church in general and in our community specifically.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. Excellent. Were there any things that you had in your mind that we didn't get to that you wanted to make sure that we included?
No, I appreciate you taking the time. I mean, I love telling the story because every time I've told it several times in different capacities, usually just like in person, but always like new nuggets come to my mind that I think about, like some of these things that like where I was on the road trip with my baseball team on the East Coast, and like, oh my gosh, those always flash to me as we're talking here. Like I couldn't believe I remembered some of that stuff. So it was an amazing experience. So I appreciate the opportunity to just be able to kind of recall this and, with fondness and share kind of what it was that drew me into the faith. And maybe I'll touch on that actually real briefly, is like, what was it that drew me to the faith specifically? Right. Because there was obviously my girlfriend, and there was talking to the priest, but like the few things that I always like to kind of hang my hat on that really kind of hooked me were, the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. I mean, it's undeniable throughout all of history, the early fathers, the teachings of the church, all through our history up until 1600 or whatever it was. Like, people believed it, and the evidence is undeniable as well. So like once I saw that, I said, okay, that's true. Now what else? And I'll put it this way, maybe a crude term, like the common sense of like the papacy and the magisterium, and how much that sense it makes to me, like having a church with a hierarchy that's able to make decisions or adjudicate or at least carry on and pass forth the truth that's been handed down. Like that just makes so much more sense to me than, like a kind of a scattered Protestant model, so to speak, where it's like everyone can kind of decide, each church, what their core beliefs are, even if they're not even the same. And so just the passing on of the faith and like the guidance of the Holy Father through time has really made a lot of sense to me. And then, I mentioned the early fathers. Like if you look at the early fathers' teachings, what do they reflect? They reflect a very Catholic mentality, very liturgical living mindset of how people operated then. And a lot of that in very similar form is carried forward into today. And so that was hard to deny in my conversion process as well.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Thanks for articulating that. It's some of us do this professionally wearing a collar, and it's always good to be reminded. Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
When someone else reflects on the core values or the core tenets, that's really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you, Father. I appreciate it.
And that's our show. If you enjoyed this interview, be sure to share this episode on social media. You can leave us 5 stars on Spotify or a review on Apple, or email it to a friend. Anything you can do to invite folks to listen, it really does help us to continue to produce this program week after week. Thank you.